right. Well, looks like we've got a good number of people here. Jed, Maria, can I just get a quick thumbs up that you two are seeing the presentation on the screen?
Seeing it.
Well, again, welcome everybody. I'm going to hand things over to Jed to get us started. Get going.
Oh, thanks, Harrison. So welcome. This is our open house. We're following up our past discussions on this project, and we're going to tell you where the project is at the moment. I'm Jed Ireland. I'm the project manager for the city, and joining us is Maria Paraki, who's the lead design project manager for Osborn Consulting, and then also I've got the interim public works director Audrey Starcy. And so just welcome. Thank you for taking your time. We're going to go through the items here, and then we'll have a question and answer at the end.
Perfect. Just a couple housekeeping things before we get going with the content. You'll see on the bottom of your screens, there's a Q&A box. As we go through the presentation, if you have questions that you've had coming into this meeting or anything that comes up as we're going through the presentation itself, feel free and drop questions into that Q&A box, and we'll be monitoring that as we go through the presentation for our Q&A at the end. If you have any issues or access needs, feel free and put those in the chat. We've got a couple of folks behind the scenes that'll be monitoring that, help you out if things come up. One more thing, just in a couple minutes, we'll post a link to a demographic survey. It helps us help you if we know who we're reaching through our outreach. And so if you could take a couple minutes, either during one of the breaks we have or towards the end of the presentation, just tell us who you are. All anonymous, but just helps us. And then finally, we'll be using a feature throughout this meeting called Mentimeter, which will allow us and you all to just share a little bit of input in real time. So stay tuned for those as we get into the presentation. All right, and our first question here on Mentimeter, so you can scan this QR code. That'll take you to the Mentimeter website. I'm just curious for a couple words on how you learned about this meeting. Give folks a few minutes there, a few seconds there to jump in. We'll have a couple of these throughout the presentation, so stay tuned for more. All right, we'll come back to those results towards the end, but for now, Jed, back to you just to walk through what we're talking about tonight.
Okay, we're going to go over quickly the project goals. We jumped ahead. Can we go back?
Oops.
We'll be giving the project design updates, the feedback that we received and what we took to council and what they directed for the scope of the project. And we'll importantly looking at the project timeline, what we're going to be doing in the short term, and then also how you stay connected, both during design when we look at things that will affect driveways and trash can placement, things like that, and then also the all-important construction, how to stay informed when those construction dates come close. And then we'll follow up with a question and answer session. The background, Lewis Thompson is obviously an important way to get on and off the plateau. This project was initiated because it was a lead project that was recommended for the Zacchaeus Basin Plan to address flooding and erosion. And so I lost the slide, if we could go back there. And then also because the landslides and the topography in the area. And so that's the primary driver of it. But at the same time, because we're going to be putting in the storm facility, this was a great opportunity that council saw to add pedestrian and non-motorized facilities for bikes, so sidewalk and biking. I'd also point out that this got extended to connect to East Lake Sammamish Parkway. Council wanted to get that done so that we could connect to East Lake Sammamish Trail. And just as an update, King County is working on phase 2 of the trail right now. They're going to be starting in the next month or so retaining walls for the pedestrian ramp that'll go from the base of Lewis Thompson at the intersection down to the trail. And then all the improvements should allow the trail to open up December of 2023. So we'll be excited to see that. Ready for next slide. Regarding improving the existing stormwater system, by tightlining, by removing the ditches and putting in a pipe, we're going to be able to upgrade the system capacity to accommodate the runoff so that we're not going to have flooding over the road. And we'll eliminate the erosion that was caused by that flow and that overflow, and we'll also improve water quality by providing treatment that isn't there now. The non-motorized improvements, again, are going to be sidewalk, bike lane, and shoulder widening. We had a good response for the community input. You can see the amount of responses that we tallied, the tally for how many people use the map, the pincushion map, the digital pincushion, to provide feedback. And we had good attendance at our last meeting, our May 22 meeting. Council, we took that feedback, summarized it for council at a public meeting. And on September 20th, they confirmed the preferred design, which we'll show on the next slide. It also includes what they've added to the project, as well as widening the shoulder on the uphill direction, and then also separate that shoulder with a fog line, a widened stripe. Originally, we talked about maybe doing a rumble strip, but for maintenance reasons and other concerns, we're going to do an 8-inch wide strip, which will increase the visibility and reflectivity for that shoulder for and bikes and pedestrians using it. Here's the design alternative. It was actually alternative 4 among the alternatives. You can see that it's essentially a standard collector arterial road section done on one side of the road, the side that's receiving the storm drain improvements. That's where we have our 6-foot sidewalk and our 5-foot bike lane. What we've deleted, however, is the planter strip between the curb and the sidewalk. It's not needed here, and also space is at a premium because of the impact that extra width would have on retaining walls and removing trees. And so that's why that element was deleted. Oh, and then you can also see on the other side, the uphill, the 5-foot shoulder, that side will receive the 8-inch fog line stripe.
All right, well, that'll take us into our next Pentameter question. So a couple of notes from you on that first one. The QR code wasn't up quite long enough. I did get a good number of responses there, so we'll leave this one up a little bit longer. Question here is, how will the new design features, bike lane, sidewalk, widen curb on that uphill side of the road, make it easier for you to walk and bike around your neighborhoods and around Sammamish? Seeing a couple of responses come in already from folks. All right, we'll jump on over to the results we've got so far. These are scrolling through. Folks put in some feedback here. Okay, we'll keep these rolling. See a couple of comments or concerns here. We can get into more specifics about this during the Q&A. So definitely hold those questions. And if you do want to put questions specifically about biking access, feel free and drop those in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. We can get to those once we're through the presentation. Now I'll jump back there. We can talk through some timeline.
So this is the roadmap of the project, which will get us from where we are now, which is the second public meeting that you see in Q4 of 2022, all the way to the end of construction. And this is the anticipated timeline. There are going to be parameters that may affect this, but this is what we think, how we think it's going to play out from now on. So we are at the second public meeting. The design team now is going to go through a number of design milestones. Those are the 6% design, 90% design, 100% design that you see in the timeline. So what that means is the design team is going to prepare packages associated with those milestones and the project is going to be built on and more complete until we reach the 100% design. These milestones also allow the city to provide review and provide comments to the design team so we improve the deliverables. Between 60% and 90%, we're going to start negotiating also with and communicating with the property owners that live along the roadway for items such as right-of-way acquisition, easements, impacts to the properties during construction, and items like that. So you will be hearing, if you live along this, the project side, you will potentially be hearing from us with those items. So as I said before, we're at public meeting 2. We're going to be starting 60% design in November. We're going to go all the way to 100% design by Q4 of 2023. At that point, we will potentially have a third public meeting closer to the anticipated start of construction, which as of now, we're thinking it's probably going to be Q2 of 2024. And that public meeting is going to serve the purpose of preparing you with more details on the anticipated construction and some things that you might be seeing during the construction. We're thinking that the project will probably going to take 11 to 15 months to be completed. So that's why you see an anticipated end of construction in Q3 of 2025. The start of construction may be affected by items such as our coordination with the Samamis Plateau for water and sewer, or permitting or acquisitions, but this is where we think things are going to happen as of now.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I just follow up on that we're working with Samamis Plateau Water and the other utilities about relocations. There's a asbestos concrete water main that's right in the line of where our storm system needs to go for this project. And so we're coordinating with that. And there's a couple options of how that might happen. And so we'll keep updates on the project website as we go forward. So again, here we've got the Connect Sammamish website. So please take a look at that. You know, to keep up to date and to join our mailing list. You can sign up for project updates there, but then also don't hesitate to send me a note if you have a recommendation or you have a specific issue. You probably already realize if you're on a driveway, that might be affected because of the road widening. Please reach out to me. We probably will be prepared to have those discussions with detailed exhibits in first quarter of next year. So probably January, February. And so we'll be looking into that. Also, Harrison just sent the link. On the upper right-hand corner, there's a survey that it's a demographic survey, and it's really about our participation, it's the city's efforts for reaching people related to, it's Title VI related. And the idea is that it's anonymous information, whatever you feel comfortable providing. We are looking for feedback on how we can improve our outreach, making sure that we're reaching everybody that we need to. We think we did a good job, but we are looking for feedback to make sure that we can keep refining our outreach so that we can get people connected. And with that, I think it is time for questions.
Great. Well, we've got a handful of questions already in the Q&A, a few with similar themes, touch on similar points. Try to kind of sum up these 3 questions into one. Really, it's just about the bike lane and which side of the road that it's on. A few folks have noted that having the bike lane on the north side of the road going downhill is good, but why not on the other side of the road? Why not on the uphill side? Jed, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. Essentially, one of the things is that we have a standard for the road. A lot of different users are going to be using this. Of course, some bicyclists are going to take a lane and they're going to fly down there. We know that. But by keeping a traditional bike lane on the downhill side, that's going to allow more users that are maybe less comfortable taking a lane to stay over in that area. And also because of sight distance issues and things like that, we really want to encourage people over there. Some people are going to use the sidewalk, but for people that are going faster, we think it's better to have a standard road section. In addition, we are including a wide shoulder on the uphill direction. The closing speeds will be less because bicycles will be have less speed in that area, but they'll still have 5 feet to maneuver. And so we think that we're accomplishing both with this widening.
Great. The other question that we have here, can streetlights be added to any of the existing power poles? Knowing that during winter hours, getting into it now, the road can get pretty dark at night.
So currently our plan is to just maintain the existing lighting that we have, which is it's more of a rural style on the PSE power poles. And so that's the approach that we're taking, but technically we could add additional lighting. And so we're interested in feedback regarding that. But right now our plan is to just keep the lighting as it is.
Great, thanks, Chad. Another question here about where did we go? About the actual stormwater improvements. The question is, did the design of the project place the Tightline in the same location as the existing Sammamish water and sewer water main? And if so, is that water main in need of being relocated?
Yes, the water main needs to be relocated. And so that's why we're partnering with Sammamish Plateau Water to see it could either be done as part of the construction contract for the city, where Sammamish Plateau, we'd have a different bid schedule. And so that'd be a separate payment for that type of work. It'd be reimbursed by the water district, or they might go in first. And so right now we're just coordinating with them. And so we don't know exactly how it'll be packaged, but it is necessary for this project that water main be replaced.
Still had a few more folks put questions in here. Just as a reminder, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. That's where we're answering these questions from in real time. If you have more questions, feel free to drop those in there. One other question that just came in, I think just a clarification on the bike lanes and the shoulder. So the question is, if the bike lane's on the downhill side of the road, the assumption is that for uphill traffic, for bikes, that they would be using that widening shoulder.
Yes, is that, yeah, it's available. I mean, it's not going to be labeled as a bike lane, but it's available for bikes.
Yeah. And to expand on that, do we know what the current width of the shoulder is there, and what 5 feet would look like?
Yeah, so it'll be widened in some areas. There's some areas that are as narrow as maybe 3 feet. And so we're going to be doing some widening in some areas. Most of the widening, I believe, is in the areas between 208th Avenue going uphill to 210th Place. And Maria might have more information about specifically, but there is some widening in that area.
That is correct. That is the main area where we noticed that based on the design and the survey that we have, that the existing shoulder is more narrow. So that's where we're providing some widening. And it's also the area where there are most of the turns and low visibility. So that would be a good thing.
Thanks, Maria. Transitioning us a bit from design into construction. There's a question here about what traffic rerouting and detours might look like during the construction phase.
Okay, so as Maria thinks about that, I will try to address that. We haven't gone into that plan, but because we're going to be doing some large excavations for detention facilities and vaults, we're going to have times where we are going to have a detour during that, because the equipment and the crane is going to have to stage right in the lane. At other times, it'll be open to one lane of traffic during construction. So there'll be different phases where the traffic control will change, and there'll probably be limited times of intense impact where we use detours. But residents will be able to get into their homes during construction.
I would agree with that. There might be some times that there might be a need for detour routes. Residents will be allowed to go into their residence, of course. And most of the time, we're hoping we can keep at least one lane open. But again, we haven't gone into that level of design where we look into the constructability of the project. And as we progress, we're going to be putting that thought into the design, but also putting some guidelines for the contractor, who is the person that is actually going to submit the traffic control plans and all those things. So, but we're definitely going to be putting some more thought into that as we progress with our design.
Okay. Well, we've talked a lot so far about the sidewalks and the roadway improvements for bikes and people walking. There are a couple questions now in the chat about the specifics of the stormwater improvements. The one about the sewer main that's going through the area, and whether that might be improved or added to. And then another question about where detention facilities might be located. So we're diving into the weeds here on the stormwater improvements. Maria, Jed, you want to take those?
Yeah, so I think Maria, maybe I'll address what I can, and then maybe Maria, you can think about where the detentions are. And then also for residents, I just thought about this. We do have a plan to address trash can collection, or trash can, to pick up and stuff, by widening the sidewalk at certain locations where they are now. If you have any questions about that, drop those in and we'll try to answer it. But we will also be working with neighbors as we see trash cans have been picked up. We're going to preserve the existing locations by widening the amount of concrete in those locations, so there's enough room to lay the trash cans out. Okay, so going back to the sewer, if I understand correctly, Sammamish Plateau Water is doing an analysis of whether they would be looking at adding a sewer main. And I think this was related to that. I'm just thinking about that. Typically what would happen is that the city standard is that those would be installed near the center line of the street, essentially 5 feet offset from the center line. And so on one side of the street, maybe on the downhill side near the center, in the middle of the travel lane, you'd have the water main, and then you'd have the sewer in the uphill lane. And so but I think Sammamish Plateau hasn't made a definitive decision on that. They're still looking at the business case for expanding that. And I think the other part of the question was, do we know about the detention?
Correct.
And I can help answering with that. We do have some preliminary locations for detention facilities. These are either going to be detention pipes or some underground vaults. So we're going to be underground systems. They're going to be located before the existing outfalls, so that we can capture as much of the area as possible before the water leaves the right of way and enters the outfall, the culvert that then outfalls into the Zacus Creek. So that's the preliminary locations we're thinking. We're going to be refining, of course, those locations as we progress with our design. But as of now, their detention facilities are very close to the existing culverts that go across the road and towards the creek.
That's a good segue into a question about those outfalls. The question here is, how is this project going to control water flows to help Zacus Creek have moderate storm flows in the winter, specifically to help with the kokanee salmon in the lake?
Maria, would you like to tackle that one?
Yes. So the main goal of this project, as Jed shared earlier on when he presented the main goals of the project, is to tightline those ditches, remove that erosion that is now happening within the ditches, and upsize the system that is currently in existence. So by adding the pipe, we're going to be removing a lot of that sediment loading that ends up into the creek. And we're hoping by adding also some water quality facilities, that's going to improve water quality in the creek. So in that aspect, we're trying to help the Secuz Creek ecosystem. In terms of flows, this is a very tight corridor. There are not many opportunities to provide flow control. So this project will be providing flow control for anything that is triggered by the requirements that by the King County manual. So we are going to be providing flow control for any new impervious area, the sidewalk that we're adding, but we're not going to be providing any flow control for the existing pavement that is there now. The only exception to that would be the outfall closest to 210th place. We're not currently required to provide flow control there based on the amount of impervious area that is added, but we are proposing a detention facility close to that outfall just because it's at the steeper part of the slope, and we want to make sure we capture anything that we can and we don't make any issues worse. Not that there are any issues, but we just want to make sure we provide some flow control for that steeper part of the corridor, the roadway. But as of now, we're not providing any regional facilities for flow control for the Secuz Creek. We're just trying to fit as much as we can within the right of way that we have and try to meet the requirements for the project for any new impervious surface that is added.
And Maria, is it safe to say that the outfall volumes are not going to increase with this project? Or
no, they should not increase based. We're treating any new impervious surface. We're treating it to pre-development conditions. So that means that the flow that is going to be coming out of the detention facilities, it should be the same as if that area that would be sidewalk was forested. So.
Mm-hmm. So, but by protecting for landslides and erosion in this area, that's one element of sediment and environmental problems that Secuz has. So that's one level of protection. But of course, along the creek, there are other sources of sediment that need to be controlled that are outside the scope of this project. They're further downstream.
Exactly. And the headwaters of the creek are not covered within the project site either. And that's where most of the flows are coming, are from the top of the creek, the headwaters, basically. So our project doesn't cover that area either way.
Looking through the questions here, there were a couple general comments that folks provided. Just want to recognize that we're noting these questions down, and we'll make sure that those comments are shared, recorded, and incorporated as we continue to move forward with design. For everyone's awareness here, they're about lighting. We talked about lighting a little bit earlier. Just to note that the lighting would potentially improve community safety and access. And then another one on the sidewalk widths being able to accommodate trash, recycling, and yard waste cans. The next question that we have is about safety for kids. Right now, understand that kids waiting for school buses stand along the side of the road. So the question here is how will the pickup and drop off be handled with the new sidewalk and facilities?
Okay, so maybe that's something that we need to address and look at in detail. When I've seen the bus collect, of course, it looks like they kind of take the intersection. And I don't know what the issues are with that, but that is something that we're interested in the feedback. We'll work to coordinate with the transit, with the bus carrier for the schools to learn what they need. We're also going to be reaching out for the trash can delivery with the waste haulers to figure out what they need. But what I've seen for the students so far, when I followed the buses, they seem to just stop, they just block the intersection. And I think that's kind of what they're doing, because that's where it's wide enough and that's where the kids are able to queue up. And so if there's something that we need to understand about that, we would like to have feedback.
I'll make a plug too there. We do have an interactive map going on the Connect Sammamish website that was dropped in the chat earlier. There's specific things that folks that live or travel this corridor a lot notice that you want us to know, you can drop a pin on that map and locations, and let us know if you see flooding or you see places where kids are standing on corners waiting for buses that we should be aware of. That's all on that Connects to Sammamish website.
Yeah, our assumption is that the sidewalk provides a place for kids to queue and to be safer. And then when the bus stops traffic, this will be a safer position. The queuing will be more organized, but we would like to get your experiences and recommendations as well.
Great. Jumping back to water and water quality for a minute. Question here from someone that just sent it in. Besides sediment removal, what other improvements in water quality for stormwater will be included with this project?
I can answer this. So the sediment removal has to do with the fact that we're eliminating the ditches, so there's no production of sediment that could end up into the creek. Other improvements for water quality, we're proposing water quality systems, underground systems to be located right after our detention facilities, so they provide some water quality for that water that comes out of the detention facilities and before it outfalls towards the creek. So there are going to be added facilities associated with its outfall and its detention facilities, so we can provide additional water quality, basic water quality treatment for some of the runoff that is generated within the roadway. This is not a requirement based on regulations, but again, since one of the aims of the project is to improve water quality to the extent feasible, these water quality facilities are added within the project scope.
Yeah, and to clarify, they're essentially catch basins with filtration media cartridges to clean the water.
Yes, so small facilities located right after the detention facilities, underground.
Great. It looks like we had a couple folks join us just after we started the Q&A who put in another question or two about the bike lanes and the shoulder. So maybe just a quick summary for the folks that joined us a little bit late, Jen and Maria, about the side of the road that the shoulder's on, side of the road that the bike lane's on, and why the design is the way that it is.
Okay. Essentially to increase the widening, to widen the road, it's easier to do it on the side that we're operating on, the uphill side. We have a lot of steep slopes and other things on the uphill side going down into the creek. It's very difficult to do significant widening on that side. And so that's why, and then also our collection, our stormwater collection, is where the ditches are. And so they're on the downhill side. So this also follows our standard cross section for a road, which gives us, a nice bike lane besides the gutter and the sidewalk. Now, we do realize that children and some people may elect to use the sidewalk, but we want to try to create the extra width that improves sight distance. And for users that are going a little bit faster and have a little more confidence, the bike lane is something that's been successful in the city. Now, council did recognize that they were willing to increase the scope of the project, because on the uphill side, the shoulder is generally 5 feet or more, but in some cases it's only like 3 feet. And so in those cases, typically between 208th Avenue and 210th Place, in that particular area, we have areas where it gets a little bit narrower. So we're going to be doing things like small retaining walls, and in one case, even a little bit of a property purchase to gain extra right of way, so that we can build the 5 foot, a wide 5 foot shoulder for bikes to use. Bikes are using it now, even with the reduced width in some places, but also the closing speeds are less. And so we feel like with that width, bicyclists will be comfortable and will make good use of it and actually have more room than they enjoy now. So that's why we're trying to balance the needs of multiple types of users, and we think this is the best fit.
Thanks for going through that again, Jen. No, it's a question we got a lot. So hopefully folks can come away from this meeting understanding the rationale behind where we're headed with the design. Staying on bike lanes for a minute, there's a question here about whether it's possible or in some future plans to extend sidewalk and bike lane from 210th Place Southeast up to Southeast 4th. which would potentially make it easier, as the person notes, to get into the bike lane. You use that sidewalk kind of further up into the neighborhoods.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, that's Southeast Fourth is in Tamarack? Is, if I understand correctly, maybe the commenter can mention, but yeah, so north or Southeast Fourth Street. Oh, okay. Yeah, of course, this project, yeah, okay, I see it. Yeah, it makes sense that this is something we'll be looking at to extend, to complete the corridor. You know, 212th has sidewalks in a lot of cases. There's gaps as well. So this project is going to be a discrete project that's mostly following the stormwater improvements. And it's a large project, but in the future, we do have the width, we could be extending the sidewalks as a future project up to Southeast Fourth, for example. But right now we've set the limits for this project, and it's mostly governed by the stormwater improvements that need to be done.
Thanks, Jed. A couple questions about driving. We haven't talked much about driving yet tonight. There's two questions here. I think we'll do them separately. First is whether there might be any improvements specific to winter driving. This person recommends making the curves less dramatic. Is that something the project might do, or what improvements can people expect as they're driving?
Okay, was that curbs or curves?
Curves.
Curves.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unfortunately, the terrain is kind of what it is, you know, and so, you know, the design is set for a certain speed, and we're pretty much locked in because the terrain is so extreme. We can't really straighten out the road. And so unfortunately, I think, but you know, I think it's a road that has had a lot of improvements with the guardrail and now with the curb on one side. It's going to be safer for the users. But the one thing that's probably not available to us is actually lengthening the curves, just because there isn't a lot of room and there isn't a high potential to add lots of retaining walls because of the homes that are right next to the project.
Jed, you mentioned speeds in there, which is a good segue into the other question about driving. Question here is whether there's considerations to reduce the speed limit from 35, what it currently is, down to 30 or maybe even 25.
What our assumptions right now is that we're going to stick with the existing design speed. You know, that affected what King County did when they built this road. And so we're not changing the geometry. And so for us, it makes sense to keep the speed the way it is for the current design and geometry.
Okay. Folks have dropped in a couple just general comments. One more about speeds, another one about crosswalks. Is there any consideration to add any crosswalks to the neighborhoods along Lewis Thompson?
No, we're not adding crosswalks at this time. Yeah, and the visit and you know, with the corners, and this might be, there are places where we'll use crosswalks, you know, but this is not typically one where we would do it in a relatively rural setting with tight constraints, and we don't really have the traffic or the where we need to direct high volumes of pedestrians to make sure they cross at specific areas. And so there's just reasons why we wouldn't want to do a crosswalk in here.
Thanks, Chad. Okay, that gets us to the end of the questions that we have right now. Haven't seen any more pop in the last couple of minutes, so give folks another few minutes here to drop in any lingering questions that we may have after hearing Jed and Maria talk through a good number of questions already.
I think there is one, Harrison, in the chat that is asking why we're doing basic treatment and not sensitive lake level 2 treatment. I could answer that. So water quality is not a requirement for this project, but we are adding water quality facilities because, again, we're trying to improve the water quality. Right now, we're proposing some of the standard system that the city has been using in other places with the media, the type of filter media that is approved by King County. for the Lake Samamis, there is a phosphorus removal requirement, but since we're not triggering water quality requirements, we're not actually required to put that into the design. However, we will be in discussion with the city as we move forward, and if there is a need or the city requests that we add something different in terms of media in the filters to treat for phosphorus, we could do that. But again, it's not a requirement to even provide basic at the moment based on the scope of the project.
Catching that one, Maria. Seeing a couple more general comments come in about safety for people biking and walking at nights when it's dark. Again, there's a good number of those comments that have come through in the chat. We're noting those down. We'll create a list of those so that we have all of your good feedback moving forward as we continue design. Thanks everyone for sharing those. Not seeing any other questions though for the minute. Did get a note from somebody that they appreciate us answering their question. So assume that means that there's no more coming from that one person at least.
So I just wanted to mention that we do have funding partners on here, and so I wanted to mention those. This project has about $3.5 million worth of grants that we've received. Part of that is the American Relief Plan Act that's administered by Department of Commerce. And then also we've got 2 grants from King County Flood Control District. And so both these 3 grants together are related to the stormwater improvements that we're doing. So thank you to our partners that are helping to fund this project.
One final question, maybe 2 that just came in. The question is from someone that lives on 211th. Just a question about what the project bounds are. Is that going to end at 210th, potentially reach at 211th? What's the southern terminus of the project?
Okay, the terminus is 210th Place Southeast. Although we are aware that there's some water over the road during large storm events that bypasses some of the slotted curb that's between 211th and 210th. So we're going to be addressing that one way or the other, just to make sure that flow enters the stormwater system. But other than that, the Tightline improvements, meaning the pipe and the sidewalk and the road widening, is all going to terminate at 210th Place Southeast.
Okay. That might be the end of our questions. Not seeing any more pop in the last couple seconds since we got to that one. Again, project website's up on the page. We dropped that link in the chat earlier just to learn a little bit more about all of you. The demographic survey helps us do better in reaching out to the community. So thanks everybody for considering taking that. Jed's contact information is up on the page here. If you do have questions that come up as you're making dinner or driving, biking, walking the road tomorrow, feel free to give him a call, send him an email. We'll work to get back to you all on that. But with that, not seeing any more questions, I think we can close things out.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time, and hope this was useful. So I appreciate your feedback and just appreciate your involvement.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your feedback.